So up until now, we have covered pretty much everything that you need to start creating basic trees in a speed tree. And we created also these basic trees using procedural techniques that a speed tree has as a project-based thing. But there are some more generators remaining. Things like leaf generator, batch leaf generator, which are identical pretty much, but they have some differences. And then we have the decorators as well. So one of the easiest generators to add is the cap generator. For example, let me take these, and of course, let's take these, or even better, the connection, and remove the connection, so that we have this separated for a later use. And now let's look at the geometry that we have. We have only the first level of branches, and these branches you see in here, it's not something that happens in nature. We should have something to cover these empty parts in here, and that is a cap generator. You go to add, and in here you add a cap, and it's going to add a cap for you to remove those parts. And it has a couple of materials. One is being an extrusion of the parent, which is this one, and one you can have and apply to have separate cap material. And it has some properties. Let me go to generation or geometry. We have an angle. It's pretty much self-explanatory. You can change the angle which is happening. You can change the scale, offset it to how much that you want, and change the slope as well. For example, if you want to slope this way, you can. And using the spread also, you can taper it down or higher. And you can decrease the thickness and height as well. And this is good for covering the cap parts which the tree generates sometimes. And the next one to add, which is a good one, let me come to here, and it's a shell generator. And shell, it's going to sit on top of the parent and get all of the settings from that, but you can use another material on top of it, or make it bigger in radius or longer or anything that you want. To add a shell, you go in here into decoratives, and this is the last one, which is the shell. You see, it's getting the most of the settings from the parent, which is applied to. The first setting is knockout, and it's going to randomly remove some of them. If you want all of them, you can have. And also you can assign another material to it. For example, let me take it and assign this material to it. And using this UV section, make it tile more or less. For example, let's make it something like this, so that we have another color on the branch. And you can also come in here and change the position so that it covers all of the branch or a part of it, or you can scale it as well. You can scale it to be bigger than the branch if you want, and you have a use case for it. And the next one is the knot generator, and we have covered that previously. Let me select this trunk, and you can either bring it from here, knot, or you can find it in generators as well. So let's bring the knot and look at the geometry to see where it has placed the knot for us. It has placed the knot in here for us. And since we have a lot of trunks in here, it has only placed this one. But if you have only one trunk, you're going to see that we have also a knot in here and a knot in here. Depending on the size of the part that it adds, it's going to add a knot. And it's good for simulating a broken branch part that may happen on trees. So we have a knot material in here, and let's apply it. And this is good for adding another layer of custom detail onto the tree. So let's apply the knot material on this part as well. And this is basically what you get. Of course, you can change the number so high. For example, let's set it to 5. Now you're getting more knots happening here and there. For example, we are getting one here and one here. And also these settings we have covered previously. They are there for randomizing. And the mode is also what you have seen previously we have covered. They are familiar, they are interval, absolute, phyllotaxy, and anything that we have saw. But the important setting in here is the outer and inner and core. And it's going to decide on the size of the knots that we add here. For example, let's make the size in here 1. It has made that bigger and bigger on this part as well. And these settings we have covered previously, so I'm not going to waste the time explaining them again. And then we have this lip, which can emphasize on this part. And then we have the inner part. And the size is going to be a percentage of this value that you add. And it's going to decide on this part, in this inner part. If I set the radius to be 50, it's going to be half. Excuse me, I should make it 0.5 to be 50. And using the scale, you can change the size of it to make it something like this, which is something that happens in some trees. And the curvature is good for adding this rim around it. You can add to it or you can remove from it. And the core is going to manipulate this sensor part that is in. So again, for the scale, you can set it to a reasonable value. For example, in this case, something is good. But also we can decrease the size. Yeah, something is going to be alright. And then we have a noise in here, which can add some noise to it if you want. And one thing to have in mind that it has a UV and a style is now set to ring. And it's going to ring this and flat this ring and map it on here, which is a common technique for UV mapping these rings in 3D. And if you set it to match trunk, it's going to use the UVs of the trunk. But since we have another material, it's not so visible. So this is mostly for it. And there's also another type of knot that we can add, and they are cavities. And they are in this decoration. Let me select the main bark and go into decorations tab, and they are here. And they are like that, but they are a bit different in shape, and they have most of the settings that the knot has: outer, inner, and core. And it's basically the same thing, but a bit different in shape. And the next one is gash, and this gash is either in decorations, and it's just like the cavity but reversed 90 degrees with all of the settings. And they're getting more repetitive as we go along, and the settings have been already covered. And the next one, let me select the trunk. It's in decorative again, and it's lump. And it's good to add these pieces to vary up the geometry. You see, it has broken the geometry a bit and creating this beautiful effect which we see here. And again, it has all of the settings as the knot and cavity and gash. But you can also increase the size of the inner to make something like this and apply another material to it, for example. And these are good for adding those irregularities into the trees. And the next one is an interesting one. Let me add it. It's in decorative, it's peeling bark. And it's going to simulate that effect when the bark has been peeling. And there are a lot of peeling effect happening in here. Let me go into this knot and apply the material to it. You see some trees have this peeling to them, and this is the way to generate them. And the settings are also the same as we covered, but there are these fins which we can change the size of to make them bigger or smaller. And also if you see some of them disappearing, it's because of the collision. Go to collision and set it to nothing so that you have all of them in here. And it's good to add a mask texture to these, for example, like this leaf. Let me assign it to it so that you get an idea of what it can do for you. You can create a destroyed bark texture, apply to it. And of course, it has the start angle as well if you want to make it like this. And the roll also to roll them, rotate. And also we have the deformation which has the folds and curl to make changes to them. Of course, these options are available if you select the fin, and the fin is going to also give you these settings. But this is a preset of that. You see, we have these branches which are presets of these branch with some settings manipulated. And you can use your trunk, for example, and add a fin. And this is going to be that, but without any changes done to them. It's the default preset, and you can see them here. Let me take these and delete them. And this is the fin card that it has created. And if you change the size and go in generation and change the number as well, you're getting the same thing basically, but that one was a preset. Okay, I believe we have done cover most of the things, but the leaves, which we are going to later on when we create trees itself, we are going to cover these as well, and also the frond and the photogrammetry, which is a topic of itself. And if we had a chance, we're going to cover the photogrammetry as well. And there are one thing that we haven't covered, and that is the zone. And this zone is this. This circle here is a zone. And this zone is an extra zone that you can spawn. And it's going to be spawned randomly on the place. So let me bring a zone. And this is going to be useful, for example, when we select it. And you can, for example, have multiple zones. If you increase the frequency, you're going to have multiple zones. So when I select this zone and apply a trunk to it, you see multiple trunks being spawned on those zone parts. Let me hide these. On these zone parts, it has covered the trunk for us. Of course, you can manipulate the zone itself. The settings are the same. You can do rotation, for example, to randomize the rotation. You can change the position to randomize the position as well. And also you can take that and rotate it as well. Let me rotate. And it's good for manipulating a zone and spawn a lot of things on that zone. Okay, we have covered pretty much everything that we need to start. And I can safely call this chapter done. And in the next chapter, we're going to do the real stuff and start creating trees and foliages themselves. Okay, see you in the next chapter.